and I can kind of introduce the show and introduce you. All right, so that's live. All right, welcome to another show with. I'm your host Craig LeBlanc, the doorman with the Bitcoin Daily Show. I'm one of 12 hosts that do 8 shows, 8 to 10 a.m. every day, and we meet a lot of great people. Matt being one of them. He's also one of our great creators. He's one of the founders of Start9, and I heard his story on, I believe it was Tracy's Friday show, and you just really gave a great lesson on how to be a sovereign individual and stuff. And I'm like, God, we need to get this thing recorded and put out on as many channels as possible, because um, it's certainly not enough that I've discovered to just hold Bitcoin. There's so much more to being a sovereign individual that I think y'all are playing a key role in. So I want to just give you as much airtime as possible. But actually, I also wanted to use this as somewhat of a discussion, a fireside chat, to just understand your background, where you came from, your childhood, and kind of where you are today and what your vision is for the future. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Matt. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks. Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So maybe bring us all the way back to the childhood of Matt. What, how did you get here from where you came from?
It's a broad topic. I'll stick to the highlights. I was raised by an entrepreneur, small business owner. My father was a baker, so we had a wholesale bread and bagel bakery growing up, and that was the environment I grew up in. At least from a work and activity angle. I grew up learning about providing quality customer service, creating great products, and just all the things you learn growing up in a small business setting. We had that bakery for 35 years, I want to say. So,
What time did you get up?
oh man. So, I started working there before I could reach the counter. And that was like, I'd go in for 2 hours, on a weekend or something like that. But once I started really working there in my teenage years, we'd go in at 5 or 6 in the morning, and that's sort of the middle shift. The first shift gets there around 1 or 2, which I did much later. After college, I took that bakery over and actually switched it to a 24-hour operation because we were growing the business. I was very intent on growing aggressively. In fact, we made a push for Whole Foods and landed the account, and so had this like huge explosion of business, under my tenure. And I switched it to a 24-hour clock. So I was actually just pulling all-nighters while I was setting up those shifts and everything. So baker's hours are fun.
And I had a friend of mine who was a baker, and I had no idea. And I think most people don't understand that 1 a.m. is your start time when you run a bakery. It is crazy, and it never stops.
Correct. If you're doing good business, you're going 24 hours anyway. But I really liked it. I loved the idea and the experience of getting up at 3, 4 in the morning and driving to work, 20, 30 minutes on the road at that time. There's a few people on the road, maybe every once in a while you'll see another car, and it's usually somebody who's up really late on their way home. So you're sort of getting to the world first, while everyone else is still sleeping. You're already up and being productive. There's a sense of serenity, peace. I used to love getting to the bakery at 4 o'clock in the morning and going in and just sitting down and having my coffee and organizing the production schedule for the day, and sort of like taking that first hour to really ease into the day and then just hit it hard. And that was a 110-degree bakery nonstop, like high speed kind of think waiting tables kind of environment at a dinner rush. Like that was the environment of the bakery. It was just go, 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 produce. And we had lines out the door. We were a famous shop. We won all the awards you can win. So
what was this? Oh, what state?
This was in Denver. It was called the Bagel Store. Similar to how we call our servers the server. My father and I are not very creative when it comes to naming things. So anyway, I loved growing up in there, and I got really good at orchestrating activities in a very chaotic, sort of juggling environment. I developed a sense of timing that I don't really know where it comes from, but like I don't set timers ever. I don't set alarms. I cook without timers, using like the oven timer. I just sort of know when things are done or when
Mhm.
I need to wake up. I have a very, very good mental clock. And I think it came from the bakery because everything in a bakery is based on timing. So you put things in a proof box and they have, 30 minutes to rise, and then they go in the oven. They have 15 minutes to bake. Then they need to come out and cool for 10 minutes before you can bag them so that they don't get soggy, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of these things all happening at once. And so, when you're in the kind of place that we were in, which is not automated, it was a very, analog bakery, like hand rolling things, putting them in the ovens with with the pallets. It's not like it was just going through some assembly line and automation. And so, a lot of people in there would set timers and everything, but every once in a while, when I was in there, when I was general managing, and really it's a beehive operation. So like I'm in there just sort of directing 15 employees in different directions all at the same time. And I'd be up there helping a customer mid sentence, and all of a sudden some mental alarm would go off and it would be like, oh, the bagels are done. And so I yell over my shoulder, like, hey, Rob, grab the bagels. They're ready. And he, sure enough, he goes over to the oven, looks in there, and he goes, how'd you know that? I go, I don't know, man. Just something started beeping, and I knew they were going to burn if we waited a second longer.
Yeah.
And so, anyway,
I think Matt, you became the bakery at that point. It was
uh,
internalized in your mind.
well, that's how my dad did it. And it was a beehive operation under him for 30 years before I really took it over. And so, anyway, I don't know if it's a learned thing or something I inherited, but I do have that sense of timing, and I've carried that with me into all my activities. I like to think that one of my better skills is juggling many activities at once. I have a pretty pronounced executive loop where I can sort of keep an eye on many, many things all at the same time in order to, align timelines. So anyway, but that got a little tangential,
Yeah,
but it was a very important aspect of my childhood that leads to some of the things I do today.
well,
Obviously,
I
it's a
think
very
it's
different
important.
world coding and building software than it is,
Yeah.
rolling bagels.
I think it's important for people to understand not just what Bitcoin is, but who the community is and their kind of makeup. Because especially with this early adopter wave that has been here since day one, um, I really stress how important it is to meet the community and to surround yourself by Bitcoiners because they really are a bunch of doers, value creators. They have backgrounds similar to yourself. Just a great bunch of people. And I think that helps build conviction is knowing the community. It kind of enforces those diamond hands and to continue to hold strong throughout all this volatility. But I'm glad you told us that backstory so that the people can get to know you a little bit better. All right, so when did you? How old were you when you exited the bakery scene and started maybe thinking about other entrepreneurial endeavors? And then how did that tie in the Bitcoin?
Well, after college, I took over the bakery and went into growth mode. That attracted some buyers, and my dad wanted to retire, and I had to make a decision about whether or not I wanted to acquire the business from him. Um, I decided that I didn't want to be a baker, that, I wanted to do something else. So I helped him arrange the sale of that business, and we sold it, and he was able to retire. So I moved on from there, and then spent the rest of my 20s. I was 24 or 25 at the time that we sold that. um, I spent the next 6 years trying all sorts of stuff. I helped a buddy of mine um, really mature and automate his fence contracting company. And he's now one of the biggest fence contractors in Colorado and having a great business. And, I helped him for a couple of years get that set up. I managed a restaurant part time for 3 years. I drove for Uber for a couple of years. I started a plastics recycling business with my brother that began by collecting scrap plastics around the greater Denver area and shipping them off to a manufacturer in Oregon, like an actual recycler where they take in and grind it up, shred it down, melt it, and then sell it as a newborn commodity, basically just brokering. So picking up stuff around Colorado and brokering. Well, that business got to the point where we were shipping 4 semi trucks a week up to Oregon, 40,000 pounds a truck. And the Oregon company decided that that no longer made sense. We agreed. So they made an investment in a Colorado manufacturing facility, and I was the general manager of that facility. So I helped organize and architect the assembly lines for destroying the plastic and eventually melting it down, all the way to hiring the staff and growing out the facility. It was a 70,000 square foot manufacturing facility with equipment that could eat cars. And so that was like a whole new world for me, really getting into the, mechanical engineering, large scale production floor operational stuff. And I did that for a while. And ultimately, we had a falling out with the Oregon investors and financiers. And my brother and I were also kind of losing our relationship as a result of working so closely together. And we decided to save the relationship over the business partnership. And so we kind of went our separate ways. Mostly I left and he continued with the business, albeit a spinoff. We abandoned the Oregon investors and my brother spun off the company. That company is now called Direct Polymers, and it is the largest plastics recycling in Colorado and growing fast. My brother is a big time industrial recycling player in that world. So that was a great experience. I became an expert in plastics recycling, which if anyone's ever interested, it is a fascinating business. About 10% of what you throw in your recycling bin gets recycled. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that is super dirty and not what people think. Most of it ends up in China getting hand sorted by slave labor. There's just all sorts of stuff. And again, fascinating business, great business, but wasn't ultimately for me. I moved on from there, decided at the time that I was going to teach myself to code. I really wanted to kind of pivot my life. And at the time, I think I was 29 or 30 when I decided to go learn how to code, specifically because I had an app that I wanted to build. I had a business idea for a iOS and Android application. And I tried to find some technical co-founders to help me build it. And the process of trying to discover, vet, hire, and work with software developers was maddening. I found that group very inaccessible and difficult to work with. And so in that process, I did enough shoulder looking and question asking to determine that there was no wizardry taking place, that it was a very accessible career opportunity for anyone who has the temperament and the brains for it, which is a lot more people than people in that industry would lead you to believe. And so I went after. I said, you know what, screw it, I'll do it myself. I'll build that myself. And so I locked myself in a room and basically didn't come out until it was done. And in the process, taught myself, Ruby on Rails backend development and TypeScript mobile hybrid development on the front end using Angular. And that was my starting point, was these sort of more accessible languages and frameworks. And then just went from there. And I became obsessed and realized that I should have been doing this from day one, that I had the temperament for it. And if you look at my past, all the way going back to like grade school, the writing was on the wall. I should have been doing this from the beginning. And it just wasn't something that was really like part of my public school curriculum. And it wasn't on the radar of, parents and mentors along the way. It just really never came up, and I never sort of identified it as an activity or career that I might be interested in. But once I discovered it, it was a no holds barred.
This is this still relevant today with all the AI tools? Is it even, would you say it's even more relevant, or that, AI is consuming all these
Yeah.
engineering coding jobs, or what are your
Oh, I
thoughts?
mean, the times are a changing, but no, there is still a very prominent and important place for human software developers. Eventually, the AIs will take over almost everything, including software engineering positions. There will always be a need somewhere for human auditing, for some very abstract and advanced programming, particularly on the like back end side of programming. Front end development is a lot easier to automate than back end development because it can be based on designs. So there are already tools. not just AI tools, but just basic dumb translators. But now you add AI to the mix, and it's getting easier and easier to take competent, thorough design mockups and turn them into code. I believe that front end developers are threatened in the medium term by these advanced AIs. Back end developers for certain positions will be threatened. Data analytics for sure. Some basic, logic where humans, in theory, could program the contracts, meaning, say, a particular function takes in as an argument a parameter of type T, and it returns, guaranteed, a return value of type B. And if you write that contract without writing any of the logic in the function, it is significantly easier for an AI to come in and fill in the blanks, to fill in the content, the body of that function, because it knows what it's going to receive and it knows what it must produce, and therefore it can creatively and efficiently create that mapping. So if anything, I view human developers as moving more and more into basically defining contracts, almost becoming kind of like lawyers, like saying, well, maybe not lawyers, but, defining what the parameters of a given program are, what comes in, what needs to go out, and then AI filling in the blanks, and then a human coming in and auditing and testing what the AI produced. So lots of
Right.
people are going to lose their jobs. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it reminds me of a business mentor of mine. He would always say, Craig, I can give you any answers you want, but you got to come up with the questions.
There you go.
I would say that's kind of what the coders are now. They have to come up with the what they want, what they're starting with, maybe the starting point and the ending point.
I mean, AI in general is it's knowing what to ask, how to ask it, refining, and auditing. And over time, the AIs are going to get better and better so that all of those things become increasingly accessible to more and more people. I mean, really, it's probably a topic for a different day because we could, go at it deeply. But the implications, repercussions of artificial intelligence are far-reaching and fundamentally, structurally disruptive to the entire human civilization. I mean, we are on the cusp of, and it's not going to be an event, it'll be a gradual erosion of the need for humans, human labor, human thought over the period of, who knows, coming decades. But we are moving into a direction where the vast majority of humans, especially in the creative and analytical careers, are not going to be needed. Right.
Mhm.
The people who are going to be the most protected and the most who are going to flourish the most, in my opinion, in the next couple decades, are humans providing skilled services. So the trades, right? Electricians and plumbers and roofers and fencers, and others. But the professional services are threatened. The creative activities are threatened. AI is going to be able to mass produce pretty much any form of art, from music to, painting to movies, like entire feature length films, all the way through the production process, from writing the script to filming it, to casting, casting the characters, and filming and post production and editing, and then doing, iterations on that based on feedback in like minutes, right? Versus something that would ordinarily have taken hundreds of people over the course of 2 years. And AI is going to take that entire process and dilute it down to a few minutes. And now there's a lot of people in those professions who are like, yeah, but it's never going to be able to produce what a human can. Well, they're full of shit, because it is. It already is. And it's an infant still, right? This thing is beyond what you can even imagine. Of course, and it can always imagine what you can imagine, but you can never imagine what it can imagine. This thing is a superhuman. And you might then argue that some people will be in it for the craft, for the art. Like there will be people who stand on principle and say, I'm not going to watch movies produced by AI. I'm only going to watch movies produced by humans. And that's fine. There are still people today who will only use products that are hand woven by somebody who took, a year to weave it. But for every one of those people, there's a million that are going to buy the mass produced thing off the shelf because, one, oftentimes it's better, right? It can be better made. And number two, it's cheaper. And number three, you can't tell the difference, right? Like most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a competently mass produced product and a competently hand produced product. And it's going to be the same thing with movies. We're already at the point where AI can produce images that people can't tell are real or not. They're going to be able to produce entire movies, novels, miniseries that people won't be able to tell had no human involvement other than the person sort of giving the AI the instructions and auditing its products and providing refinement. So entire industries are about to be wiped off the map.
Yeah, I agree. And I love to have this topic. Something I'm super passionate about. I'm actually a former master electrician, had 60 electricians that worked for me. And when I see what Tesla's doing with Optimus and how the dexterity of the fingertips and the pressure points and their ability to not crush eggs and set things down and fold clothes, I'm like, I don't feel comfortable as a former master electrician from Optimus.
You
And
should, because that is a early stage prototype that is light years away from being rolled out to every corner of the earth, right? But when it comes to the professional careers, it's easy to roll out because there's nothing physical required. But
yes,
it's going to be a long time before we have humanoid robots all over the streets providing electrician services to residences. That's a long time away because it's massively expensive to produce one of these things. And there's tons of refinement and safety protocols that are going to need to be developed. And so I think we are decades away from seeing the wholesale replacement of humans on the manual labor side of things, on the trade side of things. But I think that we are years away, just a few years away from seeing the absolute destruction of entire white collar careers.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. I think Elon makes a great point when he says, even if 100% of the automotive industry produce electric cars today, and they produce nothing but electric cars from this day moving forward, it would take 20 years to replace the current fleet. That's a lot of mass and matter that has to be reshaped into a car and then sold and distributed across the planet. And so multiply that times 4, because there's 8 billion humans. And so I think it is coming, but when you're sending software versus machine, it's just a different logistics nightmare, one versus the other.
Yeah. And so this new world, there's a lot of people who probably rightfully, in a way, argue that we've had massively disruptive inventions in the past, and all that has done is shift where human labor is needed, and that the same thing will happen here. And I understand the argument, but I also think we are seeing a qualitatively different disruption this time than we did with, certain industries like the getting disrupted, because AI combined with advanced robotics really does remove the need for human labor and human production. And I have a very tough time imagining where 8 billion people are going to when AIs can do the work of a billion of them at the same time. So it does raise questions about economic structures, political structures, like how do we reform civilization? I don't even want to say society. This is a global phenomenon. How do we reform human civilization to accommodate a world where human labor and even mental production is no longer necessary to provide every consumer good necessary and in demand, right? And so effectively, we have the supply and demand curve is erring very rapidly in the direction of unlimited supply. in certain factors, like in the creative works, for instance. There's an unlimited supply of creative products that AI can produce at near zero cost. And so, the cost of those things, the price on the other side should go to zero, right?
Mhm.
Everything should become free. Well, what does that mean for an economy? Like, what does it mean when, everything can be produced to infinity at zero cost? There's electricity, of course. It's something to talk about.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
obviously don't have answers here. I think that we have big, big problems to solve over the coming decades with regard to what is a proper human existence on this planet.
Yeah, I think we are going to live in a world, and I think within our lifetime, where the concept of work in general is just deleted. That we are, if your job is to move an object, you are going to be priced out of the object moving market. And even if your job is to design and create and audit numbers, it's kind of like if your job was ever to send a message, and now you're competing with text message that does practically just pay your cell phone bill, and you can send unlimited messages across the planet versus delivering like on Pony Express, and those jobs never came back. What do you think about how it's not so much your whole job got deleted, it's that the easier repetitious parts of your jobs got deleted, so you're required to be a little bit smarter at your job, and so that the lower IQ people are just not able to necessarily work at McDonald's anymore. These starting level jobs are going to be the first to get deleted, and so that you're going to have even a massive IQ. And I think at some point there is no IQ you could have that would be higher than what's
Well,
out there.
so you're going to see, I'll pontificate a little bit. Okay. So I think that you're going to see a exaggeration of the spread between the ultra wealthy and everyone else. Right. I do not think that this is going to shrink. I think it's going to become exacerbated because you're going to have this elite group of people who are commanding, controlling, and directing the AIs. Okay. And then you're going to have everyone else that has no use anymore. And this is going to be the vast majority of the planet. The reason why this is not a bad prediction is because everyone else will be extremely well off. Okay. Like you're going to have this super elite and they're going to be able to teleport to other galaxies and stuff like that. You're going to have everyone else who's going to live like kings and queens did throughout history. Okay. And that's going to be based on an extremely, extremely minimal amount of work required for any of those people.
Mhm.
Because with this supply being jacked up to the extreme, right? Everything gets insanely cheap. And so I am not an advocate for things like UBI. I do not believe that it is useful, helpful in any way for governments to, you know, take wealth from those who have it and then try to distribute it out to those who don't. Any form of socialism, I think, is a losing battle. Now, you could also argue that, well, okay, well, they'll print money and give it to everyone else. And that then functions in the same way as in it's taxing the wealth that already exists and then distributing it out to everyone else. So effectively, it's the same thing. So while I do not stand for a UBI, here's what I think. And I want to put this challenge out to a very creative, awesome graduate PhD student somewhere. Okay. I want someone to run these numbers because I have a hypothesis that's based on largely on intuition, but also a lot on some high level back of napkin stuff that I think that the technology of today, the productive capacity of the human species today should result in a cost of living that is a fraction of a fraction, like maybe 1/50th of what the actual cost of living is today for somebody. Okay. And I do this by roughly saying, okay, back in the early 1900s or even in the 1800s, here was our level of technology. Here was our productive capacity as a species. Here's what we understood. Here's what we could make and how long it took us to make it. And here's how many hours per week a person had to work to have we'll call it middle class standard of life. Okay. So I had to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. and my spouse didn't have to work any, and we were able to afford a family of 5 and a small house, etc., right? Like, here's the number of hours that a family unit had to work in order to afford a middle class quality of life, given the productive capacity, right? The knowledge, inheritance of mankind at the time. Fast forward to today. How much more can we produce today, given the technology of today, the knowledge of today, the machinery of today? How much more can we produce in the way of, goods and services versus what we could produce 150 years ago? It is astronomically more productive today. We
Mhm.
have the ability as a species to provide almost infinite goods to people, right? Food, shelter, toys, water, you name it. Like, we have the ability, we have the technology and the knowledge and the productive capacity to produce 10 times what the human species actually needs. Yet the cost of living has gone up. It's more expensive today in terms of labor hours to afford a middle class lifestyle in the United States than it was 100 years ago, or at least 50 years ago. Again, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head here, but my hypothesis is that if the productive capacity were to exist in a legitimate free market, that the costs of goods would be near zero, that you could afford, that today in America, I should be able to live and afford a middle class lifestyle by working 5 hours a week for my whole family. I should be able to work 5 hours a week, and the income from those 5 hours should pay my rent, should pay for all my food, all my water, all the goods that I want, some travel, some vacation time, etc. That's what I think is real. I'm not arguing from an idealistic perspective. I'm saying that that is the reality of today from a pure free market economic standpoint. And the reason it's so expensive, the reason it's so distorted, is because all that wealth is being siphoned out of the economy, right? It's being hijacked. It's essentially being stolen by the elites, by the authorities. They are stealing money from us, in the form of direct taxation, massively through the inflation tax, and also just through like hoarding, through, sort of explicitly underproducing for the sake of maintaining high costs. Like, take the diamond industry or something like that, where
Sure.
it's like
Yes.
these things exist in abundance at zero cost. But by artificially constraining the supply, you can create high prices. And I think that this is being done across the board. Like, so I think that if you let freedom reign, that if Bitcoin ends up succeeding and taking over as the global monetary standard, and along with it, we see the balkanization of governments, breaking down large nation states into smaller and smaller governing bodies, that this process will result in a dramatically deflationary environment and standard of living that skyrockets. And so I don't think we need to like do this through UBI or anything like that. I think that if we just stop tampering with the economy from a top-down perspective, the cost of living will plummet to the point where we will welcome the AI overlords, right, to do all the work for us, because we will be able to afford our lives with just a few hours of work a week. And there's always going to be that, even if it's just human to human services, right? Like, I'm going to think like massage therapy or something like that is the first thing that came to mind. It's just like, you could go become a masseuse, give a few massages a week, and be wealthy, be well off. And I think that that is the world that we're moving towards if we take our hands off of the economy, if we get these people out of our way. Um, and then what are you going to do with the other 60 hours a week that you otherwise would have spent toiling in some job that you don't like? What are you going to do? I mean, you're going to hike, you're going to exercise, you're going to explore, you're going to spend time with your children, you're going to educate your children, you're going to, you're going to do whatever you want to do. You're going to live a proper human existence and not one of being a beast of burden. So I'm for this. I am not the kind of person who says, oh, the AI is going to take all our jobs, so we have to stop the AI. I'm like, let's let the AI take all of our jobs.
Yes.
And now we can just do whatever the hell we want. But that will only happen if the wealth produced by the AIs is not hijacked, stolen, and siphoned away from us by these fiat Cantilian Keynesian economists and government authorities.
So what do you think are going to be kind of the apex commodities? Is it going to be basically electricity, ways to generate electricity, and compute are going to be the things that get us there? Because I see just computer chips and electricity just skyrocketing in this environment. I'm already seeing this. You know, I don't know if you heard a lot of what Trump said, and we were talking about this long before Trump said it, that we just need all the electricity that the world could ever produce. If you're in the business of producing electricity, you've got humans' demand for electricity globally, but you've got these two monsters showing up on the scene called Bitcoin mining and AI that are super hungry and consume massive amounts of electricity. What constraints do you see on us getting there, aside from just getting out of fiat, obviously with a sound money system that helps ramp it quicker?
I mean, energy is the only currency in the universe, right? I mean, you can create derivatives from energy, which is what money is and all forms of currency are, but energy is the actual thing that everything wants and needs. The good news is that there's infinite energy, right? Like
Yes.
there's more energy than any galaxy could even know what to do with.
Yes.
We just have to harness it in efficient ways. And at present, there are very inefficient ways to harness energy, and there are efficient ways to harness energy. And at the moment, the powers that be are pushing the inefficient ones um, for the sake of ultimately political purposes and global socialist purposes. We have very efficient energy production in the form of hydrocarbons, coal and natural gas and oil, and these are fantastic, and we should be using them to the fullest and not penalizing their use case, as they have effectively allowed the modern world to exist and to help eliminate poverty and give people, electricity all over the world. But we should also be, pursuing nuclear with every fiber of our being. I mean, it is by far humanity's best technology for harnessing energy, period. If it's just a effort in to energy out
Yep.
equation, nuclear crushes everything. And we don't, it's in use, but it is highly, highly regulated, restricted, and misunderstood by people, by everyone.
Right.
And so these regulations are allowed to persist because everyone views it as some sort of a boogeyman. But yeah, I'm not concerned about humanity's ability to produce as much energy as we could ever want from a technological angle. But obviously, there's a political angle as well, and I am very concerned in that respect, because the energy demands of humanity are skyrocketing, especially with AI and all of its promise, and Bitcoin and its promise. But we are being artificially restrained from accessing that energy by the very same people who are stealing all of our money.
Yeah, I think nations like South Korea and Russia that are just experts at producing and getting the red tape off of building nuclear 1,000 megawatt sites are going to win, because they'll be able to just produce a plant, print Bitcoin, pretty much capture Bitcoin from that energy, and then that's going to be the dominant. That's where all the wealth is transferred to. So I'm hoping America gets off their nuclear industry quickly, because there are some nation states out there that can literally just say, I am the law, build 10 of these, and then they are just mining Bitcoin and siphoning monetary money and from the
Yeah.
whole internet.
So I have an interesting take on Bitcoin mining, and I am not an expert in Bitcoin mining. It's actually the part of Bitcoin I studied least over the years. But I have a outsiders, we'll call it, take, which I think is fairly unique and maybe has some validity. I'll let others decide that. But I don't think that it is going to be a viable business to mine Bitcoin for the sake of mining Bitcoin, like we have now with the big miners, right? Their business is to get ASICs and mine for Bitcoin using the cheapest energy they can find. So move to jurisdictions and places that are energy friendly and get cheap energy, mine Bitcoin, and hope that there's a spread, that they're not spending as much as the Bitcoin is worth, and then in most cases selling the Bitcoin to pay their operational costs and maybe holding on to any excess. And that we've seen most of these companies vanish over the years because it is a very, very difficult business to be a profitable miner. I think it's going away entirely. I would be surprised if the future had a single business entity that was dedicated to mining Bitcoin as their business model. What I think is going to happen is that there will be industries that have energy needs, not to mine Bitcoin, just that have massive energy needs in the first place. Like take AI, okay? So I have, 10,000 GPUs running in order to power the largest LLM ever seen and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to, I need all this energy. Well, so I'm going to go build a nuclear plant. And there's no way that my GPUs are going to use all that energy produced by the plant, right? The plant's going to cost me $1 billion to build. And I'm looking at ROI on this. I'm saying, okay, this is going to cost me $1 billion to build. And over the next 10 years, I'm going to use the energy produced by this nuclear plant to power my GPUs for my AI. However, the nuclear plant is capable of producing twice as much energy as I can actually use for my GPUs. So what do I do with the excess energy? I can sell some of it to the grid. I can sell some of it to, others who are doing other activities that need energy, et cetera. But any excess beyond that, meaning maybe those markets aren't accessible, I can mine Bitcoin and recuperate my cost. So I actually view mining Bitcoin not as a business endeavor in its own right, but as a means of mitigating your operational expenses by monetizing your excess energy. Okay, so think about for like the home. Let's take that big example there of NVIDIA building a nuclear plant in order to power its GPUs and then using the excess energy produced by the nuclear plant to mine Bitcoin, therefore mitigating its costs and producing a better ROI on the plant. That's the big example. Now let's go to a small one. Let's talk about you and your home. Right now we have people who are doing home mining. This is a ridiculous concept in modern Bitcoin. It really is. And everyone goes out and buys a miner because of virtue signaling and social status. Everyone wants to run a miner, basically to say that they run a miner. It is not a profitable endeavor. You cannot go buy an ASIC, plug it into your home, run it all month, and make money right now. That's not a thing anymore. And so what does that mean for the home mining business? I think the home mining business has a bright and brilliant future. I think everyone's going to be mining from their home in the future, but not as the primary activity. The miner is going to be used to heat the house, right? It's not a miner. It's not a Bitcoin miner. It's a heater, right? It replaces your furnace. So what you're going to do is you're going to put some miners down in your furnace room and you're going to run them and they're going to produce heat. You're going to capture that heat to heat your home, okay? But those miners are going to produce way more energy than you actually need to heat your home. So the excess energy produced by the miners will be used to mine Bitcoin and recuperate your cost, ultimately just lowering your energy bill. So this isn't about mining Bitcoin. It's about lowering your energy bill. It's about, right? It's about having a use case for excess energy. Finally, for the first time ever, you don't have to actually build physical grids to like move your excess energy to another place that has demand for it, because that in itself is expensive. Now you can use excess energy to produce hashes and then send those hashes over the internet to a mining pool that will send you Bitcoin back. So the ultimate business opportunity here in the mining world, in my opinion, at least from a mass market consumer product, is to go door to door, right? House to house, trade show to trade show, and say to people, when it comes time to replace your furnace or your hot water heater, don't go buy one of these new things, okay? Instead, come to us. We will finance it 100%. We're going to send somebody to your home and we're going to build out your furnace room with a Bitcoin mining rig, right? A whole rack of Bitcoin miners. And we're going to repurpose your existing HVAC system and water system to capture all the heat that are produced by these miners. And it's free. You're literally not going to pay a dime. We're going to come in, we're going to put this into your home. Then you're going to turn them on. You're going to heat your water. You're going to heat your home, right? And you start in cold places. You'd want to do this up north first.
Right.
Right. So you go somewhere where it's going to be running all year round, and you say, okay, all the Bitcoin, right? So you're going to use these miners to heat your home, and all the excess energy is going to be used to produce hashes and contribute to our pool. And all the profits come to us to pay off the HVAC system that we just installed in your home. So essentially we're financing you this upfront capital cost. Then we get to mine from your home for free, basically, right? So it's like the cost of the HVAC system plus interest. We're basically just financing it. And now we have miners in your home. And I'm going to go put, because I'm not doing this, but you go put miners in, you rinse and repeat this until you have massive amounts of hash out there that you're paying zero marginal cost for on the energy, zero, because the resident is paying, right, for the energy from their provider. But once the equipment is paid off, now there's a lifelong revenue share back to the person whose home the miners are in. So once you've paid off the upfront capital cost of the furnace and mining rigs, which we'll call, I don't know, 5 years or whatever it takes, then for the rest of your life, we're subsidizing your energy. So for every dollar of profit we make from this mining rig that's in your home, we give you 50 cents back. And so now your electric bill is going down by half. And so for the first 5 years, you're basically going to pay the exact same electric bill that you always would have paid. And then after the first 5 years, it's going to get cut in half for the rest of your life. And you didn't have to come out of pocket at all. And I think the numbers for this add up. Again, this is not my line of business, but that is my overarching view of the mining industry on Earth, is that all the way from large industrial companies all the way down to home miners, nobody will be able to effectively mine Bitcoin for the sake of mining Bitcoin. It's always going to be a secondary consideration where you take the excess energy produced by something very practical and real world that you needed the energy for, and then you take the excess energy and rather than wasting it, which is how everything is done today, you mine Bitcoin with it and get a portion of that cost back.
Yeah. And the one thing I would add to that is you've got these power plants that are so efficiently built at like 1,000 megawatt. It's not that much more expensive to build if you're going to build a 200 megawatt versus 1,000 megawatt, it's not that much more expensive. It's not 5 times as expensive. It might be twice as expensive.
Yeah.
And so you'd want to build a 1,000 megawatt plant for a developing city. Yep. But on day one, that city can't even consume a fraction of it. Exactly. You're trying to encourage the city to grow. Yep. So you've got this stranded energy, you could say, or off-peak power. That's like, look, for 10 years, it's going to take 10 years or 20 years for the city to actually grow to the point to where it can actually consume all that this power plant could. And you can co-locate CCANs of miners to just sit there for that 1 to 2 decades until the city matures and then move them to the next location.
Exactly.
So I think that's another, where you have the stranded, wasted energy, or just you've got massive unused capacity. I think that's probably the best way to
this allows us to develop rural areas much faster.
Right.
Because there's no longer the economic concern of overbuilding the energy grid. You can create an energy, nuclear power plant or, massive megawatt facility anywhere. And it's way more than you need at the present. Well, just mine Bitcoin while the city grows. Right. Yeah. I totally agree. I think
just so that a decent sized little city of 5,000 or 10,000 people only needs like a 50 megawatt plant. And so when you say 1,000 megawatt plant, that's a nice size plant. A big city could use maybe 2 of these.
Yeah, it's outside my knowledge, right? Like this is not what I know.
Yeah. Well, we should definitely get together with a panel of AI people to talk about, because gosh, it's not discussed enough. And I think it's vilified. And I love what you said when you're like, no, let's let AI take all of our jobs.
Of course.
Like, unless all of you enjoy to just labor and toil.
Humans, the way I think about AI and all technology for that matter is leverage on human productivity. I mean, that is effectively what technology is. And so if you have ever increasing leverage on your own productivity, eventually what that means is that you can do this and build a city, right? Like the end game of technology is that you don't have to do anything, that humans don't have to work. This is a really important moral argument to make, because a lot of the reason that people fight against things like AI is it's out of a sense of morality. It's not a practical argument. It's a like, people should have to work to eat. We believe that. The majority of society, at least the people I like, right,
Right.
would make that argument. They'd be like, yeah, nobody gets a free lunch. You got to work. And I'm like, okay, I agree with you. But what if I had to work 1 minute to eat for a whole year? Is that okay with you? Like, how much do I have to work to get my food, to get my standard of living that I want? Like, is there some moral threshold of 40 hours a week? Is that okay? Like, because I think that technology at present and by far into the future, once AI gets a big foothold in this world, I think an hour a week. Why not?
Maybe.
Why can't I live a middle class life on an hour a week? That's our inheritance. That's what we have inherited from our forefathers and everyone who came before us, all the great inventors, right? They have left us a massive, massive inheritance of knowledge and productive capacity. And we would be stupid to reject our inheritance and be like, no, I'll toil my whole life. You
Yes.
can. Nobody's going to stop you from digging holes and filling them back up. Seriously. If you enjoy that and you think it's the moral thing to do, you can do it. But you have no right to tell the rest of humanity that must be beasts of burden, that we must work so much that we can't spend time with our children, right?
Mm-hmm.
That both members of a family have to work double full time to afford a house for their 3 kids and then send the kids off to be educated by the state. It's like we are failing so hard economically right now. And it has nothing to do with the essence and essentials of economics, supply and demand, production, labor. These things are such that it should cost a couple hours of labor a week to live a middle-class lifestyle. That is my hypothesis. And I've never run the numbers. I don't have the time or probably the expertise to run those numbers in detail, but somebody should calculate, right? Using some, heuristics and examples from history, what the cost of living should be right now, because I think it's dramatically lower than anyone else imagines. I think that right now, not even counting the AI boom that's coming, that the cost of living should be a fraction of what it is right now, and that all that wealth is being stolen from us. We should be furious.
Yes.
We're being artificially enslaved. It's not like in the past when you needed slaves to build a city. It's like, well, there's no way to build a city without slaves. It's like a bad part of human history, right? But like today, it's not necessary. That you don't need us, right? Like there's the productive capacity is off the charts. So why is it still in practice? Why is slavery still so prevalent, almost universal?
Mm. Yeah, and I would say it's how many of us are giving up that technology? I don't know anyone that's gotten an iPhone and then gone back to the flip phone. That's, gotten off of a horse, ridden in a car, and said, "No, I'm going back to the horse days." It seems
Yeah,
like ever since man grabbed his first tool, he learned how to wield it. It made him more efficient. He could do more with less. And then he taught his son how to use it. And his son improved upon that tool. And we have just been man has been searching on tool improvement since day one. And we never saw a highly efficient way out there, either by our father in the community, and just said, "No, I'm going to take 10 hours to do this work. This 5-hour way is just for the birds."
yeah,
Man
correct.
always looks for efficient ways to do things.
Yeah. And in a uncontrolled free market self-contained system, for instance, if I'm a farmer, right, and I'm doing everything by hand, like I'm hoeing the ground by hand, and then I invent some technology that allows me to do the exact same amount of work in a fraction of the time, and I use that technology for myself, well, I've just freed up all my time. Now I can go spend time with my family and do all these things. Isn't that how it should work? Right. So what's wrong? How are we inventing more and more tools and technologies that make everything easier and faster to do? And yet we're working more and more. That
Yeah.
is a anomaly. That is a conflict that doesn't make sense. And so you must be pressed for why. Why is that happening? And the answer is absolute deception and theft. It is just being stolen by people who understand the economic mechanism and have their fingers on the buttons of power and are just stealing from us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, you see that beast of burden over there, the two farmers, one that doesn't have the oxen, one does. It's just for now, we are the oxen.
Yeah.
And that's just, as long as you have power, if you have I think if man has the ability to enslave other men, there's going to be people out there that will do
Sure.
it, especially in such a disconnected way that money allows you to take from men. It's not like we have actual shackles on us, but in real terms, tax does shackle us and steal from us.
You have to work.
Yeah.
Most people have to work to eat.
Or they'll starve.
That is a form of slavery, right? When it's not true. Like if that were the reality of the situation, like if we were in the distant caveman past, and it's like if I don't hunt or gather and then I won't eat, that's just a fact. That's not an opinion. That's like you have to do that. But today we don't have to do that, and yet we do anyway because somebody's making us do it. It'd be like having that beast of burden, having that oxen, right? But you also have a technology that makes the oxen unnecessary. Like you have an automated way to farm, and yet you choose to have the animals work. Why would you do that? If it's cheaper to do it with a machine, it's more efficient, it's better. Why would you choose to use the animal? That's how I view the human race right now. It's like it's almost just to keep us busy, because when humans are bored, bad things happen, right? Like when even if you're well cared for, even if you have plenty of money to eat and whatever, it's like bored humans tend to do revolutions just for something to do. And so if anything, I view it, the whole purpose of, well, what is the point of all of it? Why keep humans as beasts of burden when there's machines that could do it? It's like, well, what else are they going to do? I think there's this fear of bored humans, of humans that don't need to work. You sit around and be creative all day, raise your own kids and, grow your own food. It's like all the mechanisms and control go away. So it's like humans who are well off economically are a threat to all power structures because they're independent. They don't need you. But by artificially constraining supply and artificially raising prices through inflation, you can keep people working all day, every day, so that they do not have time to think, organize, or raise their children, and therefore maintain your hegemony over them. And so that is how my view of how the world functions. That is it right there from a high level, is that there are these two classes. Basically, you have people in power, and you have everyone else, and everyone else is being artificially shackled and forced into labor for the sake of the maintenance of the power structure, period. Not because it's necessary or better. It's only for the sake of maintaining control. And we can end that. Bitcoin, in part, fixes this. There's a bigger picture at play here, which is what I and my team, at least part of it, are trying to work on. But Bitcoin is an essential, indispensable aspect of the new world.
Yeah. Yeah. It really stops theft dead in its tracks. And they really can't do anything about it. To me, it's the greatest weapon to defend our property. But
yeah,
I actually believe in man's ability to do productive things with his mind and body and soul, his diet, if he's freed. I'm speaking from, I literally retired about 13 months ago, and I'm sitting down thinking, what now? What is my next leg of my journey? And I was up to 4 to 6 hours a day doing saunas, cold plunges, meditating, working out,
There you
revamping
go.
my diet. A friend of mine said, Craig, when you solve your money problems, you'll find your real problems. And I just blew it off. I'm like, whatever. When I solve my money problems, I'm gonna be fine. But he was right. I saw so many other flaws in my life, from what I ate to my workout schedule, my meditative practice. Like, oh my gosh, I could work on this for the next decade. Um, and I think that's where man's heading. That once you free man from, like you said, having to work for food, he's not going to be this, strung out on drugs, rich kid, trust fund baby. Yes, there will always be those among us, but I think predominantly man does very good things with his time if he's freed up. And all you have to do is look at the American middle class as a great example of that. Like, you didn't see all just go into debauchery. We became the middle class, which is essentially like the kings of old. I mean,
Yeah.
Americans are better than kings, right?
Right.
And it looks like we're doing fine. We're the most prosperous, giving nation ever.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
also think it depends on the generation and the culture, right? So you
yes,
absolutely, I would be the the fears around, well, what if they were perfectly financially free and had infinite time to do whatever they wanted? Say like that light switch just got flipped. Like say like this wasn't a multi-generational progression, but like suddenly there was just nobody had to work anymore. That would be a terrifying situation because it is so ingrained in the culture that you are supposed to work and that you are supposed to be this sort of self-sacrificial animal for the rest of humanity and for everyone in your life, and that self-interest is a sort of frowned upon, evil thing. I get the impression that it would be an enormous amount of, probably even more than there is, like anxiety and depression. And like, it'd be like when someone wins the lottery, right? You see a lot of the times, like somebody just ordinary Joe wins the lottery and it like ruins his life. um, and that is a cultural problem. That is an educational problem. And that's why it's not necessarily a good thing to effect immediate change in many cases, right? We need to wean in a better direction for the future. And so I think that if somebody is raised with this understanding that it is not our moral obligation or destiny to labor and toil. It is not it's not a moral obligation. It is okay to accept the inheritance of those who came before us, and expect or you know welcome a better quality of life, and that being creative and pursuing your interests and passions, um, for their own sake, not because they have to become a career, but just because you're interested in it. I think that if people were raised that way, then you could have a very healthy world in which people don't have anything to do on a daily basis. Like you wake up in the morning, you're just like, I don't have any obligations except for what I put upon myself. I think that you would see people be extremely busy. Like they would wake up in the morning and they'd go all day, and they'd have long-term projects and short-term projects and aspirations, and they'd be, working on their bodies and their minds and their products, and it would all be for its own sake. And I think that that could be a very healthy world in which everyone is productive and nobody is a slave. But I do not think it can be thrust onto the existing population. I really don't. I think that most of the population is, quote, spoiled, ruined, rotten, uh, not because they made mistakes necessarily, but because we are products of this current civilization and culture. Um, and so I put most of my thoughts and hopes and efforts into the children, and then their children, and hopefully in a couple of generations, combined with the emerging technologies of Bitcoin and artificial intelligence and advanced space travel and medical advancements and the micro technologies. And it's like, I can almost see a world in 2 generations that we've only imagined in sci-fi movies where machines do everything and we are pursuing our personal goals and passions healthily in a really beautiful world. Like I can see that possibility. But we get there only through the advancement of technology and the education of the next generation, which means educating some adults now so that they can then pass it along, right? We got to stop passing on the mental illness, basically, right? Every generation is raised from a generation of mentally ill people. And I'm not like hurling some insult. I'm simply stating that we were all raised with falsehoods. We were all raised to believe things that are not true, and we have internalized them. We have come to believe them, if not in our minds, then in our emotional complexes, in our souls. Like we're spoiled, we're ruined, and then we pass that on. And we don't have to, though. You have to accept the fact, to a degree, that you are ruined, right? That you are not perfect, but that you're not going to pass it on. That you're not going to tell the kid to be just like you, that you're going to teach them a better way. And that's what I have devoted myself to doing. I have 2 kids and we're going to work on more. We want a bunch. And I'm very intent on not raising them to be slaves.
Yeah, well, I can tell you each one of us real time, the inheritance we received, the technological inheritance we have received upon birth from all the shoulders that we stand on, is greater than the inheritance of any king of old gave to his own children. No prince inherited a fraction of what a modern day child gets on day one, just with this thing right here.
Unbelievable, unbelievably productive achievement.
Yeah.
And yet we have people starving.
Yeah,
We have
not
people
for long.
suffering. We have
Not
people working 2 jobs to put food on the table. It's an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Right. You should have to work a couple hours a week to pay for your middle class lifestyle. I really believe that. And when I say should, again, I'm not talking about some sort of like made up abstract. You should be able to do this. It's not some idealistic utopian thing I'm saying. I believe that those are the numbers today.
Wow.
And it's all being stolen from us. It's infuriating.
All right, so you're going to have to give a Start9 commercial for our next interview because we spent the whole time talking about AI and stuff. We could make this go for another 5 hours.
I'm always willing to come back.
Sure.
This has been great. So yeah, no, anytime, man.
Yeah. Well, maybe give us, just like I said, a 30-second commercial so that I can, and I'm going to share and say, look, Matt's going to come back, teach us about Start9, what his sovereignty. I can't remember the words you used. You were like, if you want to be a sovereign individual, you have to take control of your infrastructure, if I remember it correctly. And that's exactly what y'all are working on, so that everything we just, actually, I think this episode lays the groundwork for what you're doing.
It's how Start9 came about, right? The philosophic thinking and practical endeavors should not collide. They should be perfectly aligned, right? Part of the reason that I have so much energy, and this is something that my team comments on all the time, like I never sleep, you know. I do, I get full nights of rest, but it seems like I never sleep because I'm everywhere all the time and I'm constantly producing and never run out of energy. I have 1 cup of coffee a day. It's like all just fire coming from inside of me. And where that comes from is the philosophic integration. I'm not just doing something because I feel like doing it. I'm not just doing something to make money. I'm doing something based on a holistic framework of understanding about the nature of the world, the nature of humanity, the injustice of it all, and a desire to rectify whatever portion of it I can. And that is a mission, right? That is that's a vendetta. And when you have something like that, you have the energy for it. This is inherent in human nature. And so anyway, what we do at Start9 is very much aligned with the discussion that we've just been having, which is about leveraging technology for greater human productivity and not allowing that excess productivity to be stolen from you. And so when you use this incredibly advanced device, modern technology, your phone or your computer, and all the things that you do with that phone or computer are at the permission of and through third-party intermediaries, they are stealing that technology from you, right? Like I have a phone in my hand and you have a phone in your hand. Why can't we message each other? The technology exists for you and I to message each other directly. So why don't we do it? Well, it's because somebody has stepped in the middle and said, no, you need me to do that. You two can't send each other a message unless it comes through me. I will broker this deal, this transaction between you, and you will pay me for it. And I will have insight into it. I will store it for the future to be used against you if I feel like it, right? It's like this awkward person that just sat in the middle of us and just said, no, you're not allowed to talk to each other except through me, right? I can invasion of privacy. I can cut you off. Here's my terms and conditions. You must check the box and agree to them. I'm going to charge you guys on a monthly basis. Oh, and by the way, I'm doing this for everyone. So if anything ever happens to me, all your stuff gets leaked into the hands of hackers and attackers. It's a very ridiculous paradigm when you think of it like that, right? Like, why can't I just talk to you? And the answer is because in order for you and I to talk directly and achieve the same level of convenience and user experience that you are accustomed to, it requires a server. It's so simple, okay? In order to compute across time and space from one part of a world to the other part of the world, from yesterday to today, the only way to do this is through a device called a server. Servers are an essential, indispensable component of the computing paradigm that enables all the wonderful conveniences and user experiences afforded by modern computers. Do you run a server? Does he run a server? Does everyone run servers? No, nobody's running servers. And yet servers are necessary. So if you're not running a server, you must use someone else's server. And in fact, on your phone today are probably dozens of applications, and on your computer today are probably dozens of applications that are using dozens of different servers. So not only do you have one middleman standing between you and everything you want to do on your computers, you probably have dozens of middlemen standing between you and everything you want to do. And each one of them has their own terms and conditions. Each one of them is watching everything that you do, every button push, for either the purpose of improving their product based on how you use it, or to mine your data and sell it to advertisers, or to mine your data and sell it to governments, whatever it happens to be. They can see everything. Because of their terms and conditions, you can be cut off at any moment for saying the wrong thing, storing the wrong file, maybe just being in the wrong part of the world. You can just be cut off willy-nilly. Your technology is not really yours if you can be cut off at any moment. He who has the power to destroy a thing has absolute control over it. So if somebody has the ability to destroy your communications network, then they have absolute control over your communications, which means you're not free. Okay. Then they can charge you. You need your phone, right? You need those apps. It's how you function in the world today. We're increasingly dependent on these things. And so if you're using somebody else's server behind the scenes, then you are dependent on that person. That is a bad place to be as an adult. You don't want to be dependent on other adults who don't even like you or know you for your basic needs, because they're going to abuse that position. It's okay to be dependent on somebody who's earned your trust. It's okay to be dependent on a business partner or a spouse, right? Or a close friend, because you know you can depend on them. But if you are dependent on some nameless third-party giant corporation who doesn't know your name, you're a number in their database, they're going to take advantage of that. They have to take advantage of that. That's just a natural thing. It doesn't make them a bad person. It's part of the incentives. And so they're going to extort you. That's the number one way that they're going to take advantage of their position and your dependency, is they're going to extort you. They're going to take things from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Whether it's your data or your money, they're just going to take it. and your dignity is one that a lot of people leave out of the equation here. They are taking your dignity, and that has value. And then lastly, like I said, it's just a massively insecure model of computing. When everyone is using these third-party servers, the third-party servers become obvious attack targets. And in any kind of meaningful cyber war will be breached. And when they are, all the data that you thought was being kept private by this company will now be in the hands of everyone, leaked on the internet, and you can be blackmailed through ransomware as a result. So while we haven't seen a lot of this yet, I think it's coming in a big way. I think Google Photos is going to get hacked. And when it does, and whoever hacks it has your email address and every email address of everyone in your life, and they find some photos that you don't want people to see, you will get an email from a bot that says, look at these photos attached to this email. If you don't send Bitcoin to this address in the next 24 hours, everyone in your life, including the people you talk to most, will have them in their inbox, and you'll pay up. And it has nothing to do with you. You were never a target. They never wanted to attack you. They didn't even know who you were. This only happened because you were dumb enough to put all your private shit on someone else's server. So the way I view this, all that said, is that humanity, through naivety and laziness to a degree, has allowed the emergence of a computing paradigm that is borderline existential. It is a serious, serious threat to life, liberty, and dignity if we don't recognize it and fix it. It's only been around for a couple of decades. And when I say it, I mean cloud computing. Okay, broadly speaking, the colloquial term for this is cloud computing, where everyone is using remote controls to connect to a central server for the sake of processing and storing data. So long as that is the dominant form of computing on Earth, I fear for humanity's future. Seriously, I think it's that big of a problem. And it's only been around for a couple of decades. It's only been around for like a decade, really, in earnest, like when it really, really became a mass, widely used model of computing. It's really only been like the last decade, two at most. And so I think that the future, posterity, will look back on this period as the infancy of humanity's foray into computing, advanced computing networks, and view it as like a silly little mistake that was natural to make, but was like a huge problem. It's just going to be like, oh, those early humans with their computers, my God, they thought it was a good idea to shove like everything onto central servers, not realizing that it had inevitable incentives and consequences that were going to lead to disaster. The proper model of computing for Earth, for humanity's information age, is a model, a distributed, decentralized model of computing where you, me, every small business, every family has one or more servers, personal, private servers that they are using in the same way that they use the current third-party giant servers in the cloud for all their computing needs. So instead of now when I text you, I don't have to send the message on my phone to a Telegram server and then have the Telegram server send the message to your phone. That is the bad model of computing. Instead, what I should be doing is I should send the message from my phone to my server, my personal private server, which then relays the message to your phone. It's really not that complicated. It's exactly the same flow of information, exactly the same model architecture. It's just that it's self-contained, that everyone has their own little cloud. So instead of cloud computing, it'll be, mini cloud computing. We need a better name. We call it sovereign computing. That is our word for the model that I just described. And not every individual on Earth needs to run their own server. It's just that you need to be using the server of somebody you trust. Like I said, if you have a trusted friend or a business partner, all right, a loved one, it's okay to use their server because they're not going to use it against you. They're not going to abuse that position. They're not going to extort you. They're not going to spy on you. They're not going to censor you. The server doesn't have enough data on it to be warranting of an attack, so it's not going to get attacked. That's a fine model. It's a federated model, right? But nothing stops you, even if you are currently using somebody else's server, like a trusted friend, nothing stops you from then going the whole nine, spinning up your own server and using that instead.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to continue to go further down that rabbit hole on our next chat and share with this even more. I'm going to put this up on our YouTube channel as well and try to get it out. But where can we, obviously just start9.com is, do you recommend a model, or you probably just make one model?
Start9.com is, our just landing page where you can start to learn about how we do what we do. I sort of just explained the why. You learn how we do it, all the way down to potentially making a purchase of a physical server. But our software is free and open source, so you don't have to buy anything from us to get the full experience. There's not like the free tier and then the paid tier. It's like there's only the full tier, and you can either pay for it or get it for free. But ultimately, you need hardware. There's no such thing as a server without a computer, right? Like a server is a physical computer. It'd be like having a laptop without a laptop. You can't do that. So it's a physical computer. If you have a physical computer currently, you can download our operating system, Start OS, and flash it to that computer, thereby converting that computer into a personal server that you are capable of administering. If you don't have a computer that you would like to repurpose, then you're going to need to buy one. And if that's the case, buy it from us because it helps fund the development of the software that we are giving away for free. That's our business model. We sell hardware at a very small markup, very reasonable prices, in order to pay for the software development of Start OS. So we can talk all about Start OS and what it can do, how it does it, how to use it. It's very easy. On the next episode.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Matt. And let's book it maybe in the next month or so. I want to get a lot of, I'm even going to kind of promote it and get a lot more people involved with it. Right. And then I'll point them to this episode to kind of as some homework, and then dive right into.
Yeah, we could cut the last piece there where I'm talking about Start9 as like a preview for the next episode or something like that.
Right. Yes, let's do it. Well, thank you so much for your time. Hope you have a good rest of your week. And then if people want to find out more, they can find you on Start9 on X. Is that where y'all post a lot of information?
We do. We're also on Nostr. The start9.com domain is NIP5 verified. So you can find me and the official Start9 handle on Nostr by just doing @Start9. We're on X at Start9 Labs. And we have a Telegram community, which is large. We also have a self-hosted Matrix community, which is a lot smaller, but runs through our own servers. Lots of ways to reach us. Just go to start9.com/contact, and it's all right there. And if anyone needs to reach me for any specific purpose, like a podcast or a business opportunity, I'm very easy to find. Just hop into any of those channels I just mentioned and find my handle, tag me, and I'm extremely responsive.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Matt. I can't wait to do this again.
My pleasure, Craig. Thank you. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So that was Matt. Man, what a great guy to converse with. I really want to do a panel with him just on AI, and because I don't think a lot of people speak enough on it at his level. And I really think we're heading towards an abundant future, especially with guys like Matt working on the projects that they're working on. If you haven't heard about Start9, please look into it. Listen to today's episode, share today's episode, and then we're going to do a follow-up with Matt on it is exactly what it does, probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But again, I am Craig LeBlanc here on X, the DoorMan. I am one of 12 hosts that work with the Bitcoin Daily Show to produce content for you guys here in the Bitcoin community. So please check us out. We're here every day, 8 to 10 a.m. on X Spaces. And then I produce these videos to try to highlight some of the people that we meet just working in those spaces. And so love building this today for y'all today. Love working with the community. Again, this is really team effort at the Bitcoin Daily Show. Appreciate all the love and support y'all are giving us. And please look into getting a Start9 today and start building your little sovereign nation inside your home with Bitcoin and your own server and everything Matt has talked about. But y'all have an awesome day, and let's go stack some sats. Love you guys.